The way I think about it is, I think a lot of lawyers have this idea that when we talk to like a client or a potential client, they should feel lucky to hear the magic words coming out of my mouth because I'm a lawyer, right? However, shouldn't it actually be the other way? And it's how I look at it is there's 100 other people you could call. And yet out of everybody, you chose to call us and put your trust and care in us. So there needs to be a shift in the way that we think about that idea of who we are as attorneys.
Law school taught you the law, but it didn't teach you this, how to connect. Be that one lawyer who shows up different, the one clients trust, the one they never forget. I'm Neal Goldstein, and this is That One Lawyer Podcast. Let's get started. Today's guest is a lawyer who's built something most attorneys only talk about, a practice rooted in purpose, service, and real relationships. Chris Nicolaysen is the founding partner of the Springs Law Group in Colorado Springs, building a law firm from scratch and showing up for his clients not just as a lawyer, but as a trusted guide. He leads with values, puts people first, and believes that trust is the best business strategy there is. Christopher, welcome to the podcast, That One Lawyer.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat, to catch up, and to share my story.
That's great. So, God, there's so much to talk about because I know that you and I met at John Fisher's mastermind group, and it was probably, I'm just going to say maybe 5 to 7 years ago. And I felt the connection right away. And, my instincts were right. Everything about you is just real, genuine, and authentic. And I know you have an interesting story. And I also know that at one point in your life, I think you and Gretchen both lived here on Long Island. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
would love to first talk about your backstory. So can you tell everybody a little bit about your backstory?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel the exact same way, Neil. Like there's those connections that you make in life where it's just like it just hits and clicks. And it's a thing that anytime Gretchen and I see you on social or things like that, we're just always like, we're really, really happy that our paths have crossed. And like you're one of those humans that we just look at and go, really glad we know you. So but yeah, my backstory starts in Ohio, grew up in a small town there. I'm the oldest of 4 kids, 2 parents that were blue collar workers. And then ultimately, so I graduated high school in 93, not really knowing what to do. And then ended up working at Cedar Point in Ohio, which is one of America's largest roller coaster amusement parks, and met a girl. And, the girl at the time at 18 ends up becoming my wife in the long run. And so she moves out to Idaho and then I follow her. She's going to school there. And then ultimately we end up down in Las Vegas. Both get our undergrad degrees from UNLV. Both of our kids were born in Las Vegas. So we have 2 daughters, Sydney and Megan. And, their big claim to fame is they were born in the same hospital that Tupac died in. So it's Sunrise Hospital in Las Vegas, but I had some cool experiences, both working retail and waiting tables out there, which from a business standpoint and just a client service standpoint, I really think that everybody should work retail or restaurants, at least in some form or another in their lives, because I think it's super helpful in how you can talk and just handle a conversation with people and connect.
Right. Right.
And so we do that. But I think there was a book that Poe Bronson wrote years ago called What Should I Do with My Life? And it's got these little snippets of people's stories on what should they do, and kind of how they find their purpose. Because for me, being married and having kids was actually pretty easy. I connect really, really well with my wife and my kids. I've got 2 daughters that, they're pretty great. And so, but figuring out what to be whenever I grew up was a really, really hard thing. And then so ultimately I read some stuff from Ron Clark, who's a teacher down in Atlanta, and went to go become an elementary school teacher. That was an experience and not what I thought it would be. And so then after that, what any wise person would do in their, early to mid 30s is I decided to go to law school. And so at that point, the law school journey started for myself. And then since then, it's been a chain reaction for myself, my youngest daughter, and then now my wife as well. And so that's kind of all of it just in a tiny little box, but
Sure.
yeah,
I'm sure there's a lot more. Maybe we'll get into some of that while we're
absolutely.
talking. But,
Yeah.
obviously you were later to the game of law practice. And I
Right.
wonder if everything that occurred to you before you went to law school, before you decided that you were going to become a lawyer, if all of the stuff that occurred to you beforehand helped you be the lawyer you are today, because I know you run your practice with the intention of putting client relationships first. So
Yeah.
tell me about what in your background put you to have that philosophy. What made you feel as though I have to put client relationships first, or in general, I have to put relationships first? I know you went through a lot of things that you did before, a lot of jobs you had, a lot of
Right.
people that you met.
Right.
Connecting the dots now, which is easier,
Yeah.
what brought you to that point of relationships really matter? Because that's what this podcast is about. And you and I both, I think, have talked
Yeah.
about that a lot. So tell everybody
Yeah.
how you got to that point.
Yeah, I absolutely do think it helped quite a bit because if you think about it and you go directly from high school to undergrad and then right into law school, maybe you've had some jobs while you're doing that, but you're missing certain like life hacks or experiences. And those gave me, I think the two that really helped me out the most were it was the retail restaurant side, so the customer service side there. A lot of chaos at times and handling chaos, but also still keeping the focus on the customer. So I remember an experience at Banana Republic at the Venetian when I was working there, where one of the big things we were told is you need to like talk to the clients or customers coming in, but get them to own the product, feel the product, touch the product. So that way, too, they've got a sense of ownership of the thing that they're going to buy. So here it's a little harder because I can't give them an ownership of a case file, but I can give them documents. I can give them my time and my attention, which also helps them have some ownership there. And then the other thing we talk about quite often is the idea, too, that we're also teachers. And so as a school teacher, we're teachers along the way. And I still use with my clients and with my staff the idea of something that used to teach my fourth graders, which is to use our I statements when we're talking to other people. I don't like it when X happens. It makes me feel blank. And so, like those simple little things that works really, really well for an elementary school student can work really, really well as well for your own clients as they're talking about their cases, which can be a really, really high pressure time for them. So I think the idea of good customer service and also just connecting and teaching them because you've got to walk it through with them because they've never gone through this process before. And so it's really, really been something that we focus on quite a bit here, both from the customer service standpoint with our clients, but also with our team members as well. Because, you've got team members day in and day out that are going through life stuff. Everybody has stuff. And so as the owner, I've got to also make sure too that my team is being taken care of the same way that we want to take care of our clients.
Yeah, so you brought up something about your team members. So right away, the first thing that came to mind was Dan Kennedy's philosophy, which was I'm the boss. The employees are pretty much, I don't need to get emotionally involved with them. I don't need to know who they are. It was a very hard-lined philosophy of running a business, and at the end of the day, it was ROI dollar signs, as opposed to a bunch of other people like Brene Brown and Simon Sinek, who all feel very differently about that. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming you run your team like the latter, not the former.
Yeah, you're correct. And I've actually talked to some of my team members, my operations manager and others about the remember the movie Hoosiers where
Yeah.
Hackman walks. So Hackman had the thing in there where he tells the team he's like four passes in their first game. Before you shoot a shot, you must do four. And then they ultimately don't do it. So then at halftime, he walks in to them, and this is the Dan Kennedy approach. And he's like, what I say here is the law, period. Now, at the end of the day, the buck stops with me. But I do believe, though, that as a good leader, it's important that I take any fault that goes on with the company is on me. Anything that goes well, I praise the team. We have a leadership team. We have what we call a fix it team where our support staff can get together. And I got that from our friend Jim Hacking. But I really, really strive to have the team members having an input and a voice because they're the ones in the trenches day in and day out actually doing the work. And so whatever I can do, I consider myself these days more of like a Steve Nash type assist person who's here to assist and help them solidify and do their job better if I can. And so that's really,
Right.
really my goal. Yeah.
So, I just wanted to follow up on something previously that you said, having the clients invested with respect to their case. I know we both know that the attorney-client relationship is essential, and we know the
Hmm.
boundaries of that relationship. But I
Sure.
often try to tell people, especially younger lawyers, you have to consider your clients like partners. And that's really what
Hmm.
they are. If you think about it,
Yeah.
they're coming to you because you have a certain set of skills, right? And you
Yeah.
want their case for obvious reasons. You want to do something
Right.
good for them. You want to feel better about yourself. You want to
Hmm.
make money. Obviously, those are
Yeah.
obvious things. So why not treat your client in many ways like your partner? They have as much, if not more, invested than you. And so I
Right.
never found, I've always found lawyers, especially PI lawyers,
Hmm.
their egos are so inflated that they forget that the client is the one that's generating who they are. So,
Yeah.
I think it's a really good piece of philosophy that you have with respect to your clients.
Well, and I'll tell you, Neil, what's interesting about that, and I say this a ton, I actually think because ego is something we talk about a ton here, and Cy Wakeman, she has some great books on ego. And so she has a good book called No Ego that I highly recommend. But I do believe there, obviously, in the attorney profession, there are a ton of people out there with a ton of ego. And sure, it can be both a good thing and a bad thing. But it's just not something that we have a place for here at our firm. Always say too that no one person is more important than any other position within the firm as a whole. Period. Because if you think about it, if the reception does not answer the phone, then we don't have a new client coming in. And even with our clients, they need to know everything going on. So the good and the bad. So if I just say only the good stuff about how sunshiny and great their case looks, I'm really actually doing them a disservice. And
Sure.
so we talk a lot about it's our job to really be open and honest with you. And we've done some stuff. I've gone to trainings with Nick Rowley where he talks about you treating people like they're humans because they're humans who are going through human problems right now. They're not just a cog in the machine or anything else like that. And as PI lawyers, right, we've got the mantras of like scum sucking bottom feeders or ambulance chasers or what have you. But the reality here is what we really want to do is help humans through some really hard stuff that they haven't gone through before and give them a step-by-step process with an honest opinion. And sometimes the hardest thing we have to do is really tell them, the hard truth on where things are shaken out in their case.
Yeah, yeah, it's 100%. And I know, talking about team members, and that's how I try to refer, to my people as well. And it's amazing how at the end of the case, not the end of the relationship, but at the end of the
Yeah.
case, the clients are crying, not because they're leaving me, but because
Yeah.
they're leaving the legal assistant who I don't know, they really have made friends with them.
Oh, yes.
The legal assistants are key. The person that
Yep.
answers the phone is key. And
Hmm.
I don't think old school lawyers and even, lawyers now, many of them truly understand how important not only the whole team is, but the person that answers the phone, which in
Hmm.
prior generations was always thought of as almost at the bottom of the list, whereas
Right.
I believe they should be right at the top.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think it's Dave Ramsey calls it like your director of first impressions, right?
Oh, for
And
sure. Yeah.
first impressions matter. Like
Hmm.
they matter so much. And it's like the words we say, the tone we say, the time and care that we give to talk to that person who makes that call. That's the thing I was going to say too. So speaking of ego, the way I think about it is I think a lot of lawyers have this idea that when we talk to like a client or a potential client, they should feel lucky to hear the magic words coming out of my mouth because I'm a lawyer, right?
You're right.
However, shouldn't it actually be the other way? And it's how I look at it is I'm lucky that you chose to call us because there's 100 other people you could call. And yet out of everybody, you chose to call us and put your trust and care in us. So there needs to be a shift in the way that we think about that idea of who we are as attorneys, and how we treat our clients
Well,
in that sense.
I have to say, Chris, I think this is indoctrinated in law school.
Hmm.
When go to law school, often they disproportionately talk about big law.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
Personal injury lawyers are not really what they want to talk about. Let's be honest.
Yep.
And so lawyers have this, they either have an ego because there's something missing within themselves,
Right.
or they truly believe that they are high and above beyond any client, and that the clients, as you say, should be thrilled that they're working on their case. I
Yeah.
mean, just look at the dozens of commercials on
Yeah.
TV.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's got to beat their chest. In fact, I was looking at a commercial this morning when I think there's like 5 different firms that advertise on the same channel.
Sure.
And I say to my wife, why are they all saying the same thing?
Yep.
We're great. The insurance companies hate us.
Uh-huh.
We go to trial every time, which you and I know is bullshit. So what is the problem? So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
When you meet another lawyer, let's say at a
Mhm.
mastermind group,
Sure.
and by the way, in John's mastermind group, we don't have a lot of those egos.
No.
But occasionally they float in, or you see them somewhere else, and they start sprouting their wins. And who knows if they're being honest?
Yeah.
What do you do? Do you say, okay, this is a person I can't deal with, or do you try to work with them in some way?
I think you want to try to find out a little bit more and go a little deeper and just see, is there something there, or is it just that thing of like that facade, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, if that's all that's there, I think life, I'll be 50 this year. I think life's a little too short sometimes. And you like we talked about in the beginning, when there's a connection, and then you really work that connection, right? And you can feel the genuineness of the people that you connect with.
Right.
If somebody's just living off of ego and accolades, then it's probably, if there's not more there, it's not the right fit.
Right.
We're big here, both with our clients and with our team members, about fit. And I think it's a really, really important thing that we, focus on, is being a fit of the team, being a fit of somebody that we want to work with, but also even within my friend groups these days, is it going to be a good fit? And so that to me is really, really important. And honestly, the thing I respect quite a bit more are people that just want to, that not just, but that can openly talk about their failures and be vulnerable. I find, failures are something that really shows people getting out there and trying and getting back up again and moving forward. And I think that's where the magic happens.
So let's segue into that for a moment.
Yeah.
So again, we're probably going to have a lot of younger lawyers watching this, listening to this.
Yeah.
Can you share a moment of failure that really hit you hard, and how you returned back to the success that you are now?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of them. And so one of the ones that I talk about, in some of my talks or things like that, was back in law school, but it's one too where we're in second semester of contracts, and then I have to, it's my turn to go, from the Socratic method.
Right.
And but it's close to the end of the semester. I'm studying with a friend who booked the class the semester before, and she's like, "Yeah, I stopped reading, and I'm just going to pass because I'm studying for the final now." And so this end stuff to me doesn't matter as much, so I'm just going to pass. So I'm like, cool. If my friend's doing this, then I'm going to do it as well. So I go, and my professor looks up, and he's like, "And Mr. Nicolaysen, are you ready for today's case?" And I'm like, "Professor, I'm going to pass." And he goes, and this class probably had about 100 people in it, in one of those tiered rooms. And he's like, "I'd like everybody to turn around right now and look at what a failure looks like."
Oof.
And I'm just like,
Oh.
right then I'm gutted. You know what I mean? But the crazy thing about it is, as I step back and then, and I look at it, is I still followed the plan that I had in place, and the way that it actually recouped. It hurt in the moment,
Sure.
but in the long run, the plan still worked, because the thing my friend was saying was correct, because I ended up getting a much better grade compared to my first semester. And so that's one thing. So sometimes the moments of what other people see, and it's made me reflect a bit, they don't understand the whole picture or everything happening. So my professor from that one instant thought failure, but the reality is he didn't see all the work I was putting in, the plan I had in place, the preparation. And so it really made me kind of look at, in a way, other people's opinions and just go, okay, you know what I mean? You can
That
have that. That's
it,
fine. You have you, but here's what I'm doing.
That's a great story. That's a great story, and just reminded me of a similar story. My first year, my first semester,
Hmm.
contracts,
Yeah.
Professor James Brooks,
Uh-huh.
typical nerdy looking guy with glasses. And, I coming out of college, I thought, I don't really have to study that much, especially it's the first day. Just imagine this. There was no digital really. Just
Hmm.
maybe a few rich kids had a few laptops, but that was
Sure.
it. But that was it. But there was about maybe 80 of us in this huge lecture hall.
Uh-huh.
And I guess we had an assignment before we even started class. And I didn't read it. And I was just sitting next to this person and he just so happened to call her.
Ah,
And I said, thank God, I'm not going to get called after this. And he said to her, okay, Miss So and so, and I won't mention her name because she's now a judge in the Supreme Court here in New
ah,
York. And he said to her, so and so, can you tell us about the case? And she says, no, I'm sorry, I didn't prepare. And he didn't say anything. And then I said to myself, well, what's the chance he's going to call me? There's
right.
80 people.
And you're
What's
right.
the possible chance?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? The next thing out of his mouth, Neal Goldstein. And I figured I would just say the same thing she said, and
Okay.
he would just go on to the next person.
Right.
But I said, I'm sorry, I'm not prepared. He took off his glasses, his black, thick rim glasses, and made a fool out of me.
Yeah.
Rest assured, the rest of the semester, I was ready every time I went to that class
Yep.
to say
Yes.
something that was somewhat intellectual.
Yeah.
Uh, these are all journeys that we have and moments in our life that put us in a better position and gives us the ammunition
Right.
so that later on when we come to those moments, we know what to do, how to prepare, especially as a lawyer. The last thing we ever want to do is not be as prepared as our adversary.
Yeah, and I think there's like two things here that I think about with this, and it's a thing I think I just did a post on it the other day where it's in those moments of like doubt or what have you, or failure or not achieving exactly where you want. So this can be for the younger lawyers listening or other business owners or what have you. But I think you have to back and ask yourself, what's the lesson I learned here? Like, because if you don't and you just keep moving forward, right, and going to the next thing, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. So you yourself ask yourself, what's the lesson I learned? I need to be prepared for every class, right, going forward. And so instead of just going, yeah, we'll just keep doing what I'm doing. And so I think that's vitally important to do that. And then the other thing that's been like kind of hit my head recently is there's a Tom Hanks doing an actor's table, and there's a video out there of him talking
Yeah.
about, you think, that life is going well, this too shall pass. Life's getting hard, well, this too shall pass. So no matter what's happening, you run through these ebbs and flows in your life and through your business and through your legal career of you're going to get that trial win. And then guess what? Next time you go in, you get defense. And so it's like, but each time, what are the takeaways you're taking from the win? What are the takeaways you're taking from the loss? Because it's all going to pass.
So,
And so, yeah.
yeah, so that's 100% true. It's good that younger lawyers are listening to that because that's really important. So, kind of moving, a kind of parallel to that is have you defined what success is in your life? I know that's a kind of a corny thing that everybody asks and says, and I guess there's a million different answers for that. So maybe the right question is, how do you define success? But you know, I don't know, younger lawyers, there's so many pain points that they're having now that I'll follow up and ask you another question about that.
Yeah.
But what's your measure of success?
Yeah. So I think, after I turned 40, the idea of time versus money really became important to me. And time, I actually value it a lot more than I do money. Now, don't get me wrong. I like money. I like nice stuff,
Yeah.
all of that, but I
Mhm.
value my time a lot and ended up getting a coach. So Dan Martell, who wrote Buy Back Your Time,
Mhm.
ended up hiring with him for a bit and working with him. And it's a really important thing to me. So I do think, I don't have a mantra definition for it, but to be able to do what I want, when I want with the people I want. Honestly, so day in and day out, if I can do that with the team I have, with my family, you know, and things like that, And
Yeah,
so that's kind of that idea of success for me.
yeah, I kind of agree with that.
Yeah.
I think my alignment is the same, although my measure kind of morphs every so often into
Uh-huh.
something else, but I'm not constantly chasing a number, a
Right.
higher number. I'm done with that. And the truth is, myself, I've pivoted for the last couple of years
Yeah.
into doing different things, and it probably cost me financially a bit.
Sure.
But you know what? At the end of the day, it really isn't about the numbers at all.
No.
And unfortunately, I'm going back to younger lawyers because that's the demographic that's really having issues now.
Yeah.
I read, I forgot what I think I was on Reddit, and
Mhm.
somebody was making a statement that they were going to switch from, I forgot what they were practicing, and they were going to go into personal injury because their friend just told them that they made $700,000 last year as a
Sure.
personal injury lawyer.
Sure.
Now, you and I both know, we're both honest, forthright
Yeah.
people. You and I both know most PI lawyers don't make that every year. Yes,
Correct.
that's a great salary.
Yeah.
If I made that every year of my life, I'd be thrilled. But let's all be honest, that doesn't happen to most personal injury lawyers.
Right.
Most personal injury lawyers make less than that, and
Yeah.
that's okay too.
It is.
And then, yes, there are lawyers that make a lot of money. God
Mhm.
bless.
Yeah.
But it's this. There's a distorted view, I think, of what kind of money you're going to be making as a personal injury lawyer or any other lawyer.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's a thing we talk about, because even out here, I believe a starting salary for a district attorney out here is fairly close to the starting salary for like an assistant manager at Home Depot or
Wow.
Target. You know
Wow.
what I mean? Something like that.
Right.
And so the days of like, and I've got signs from Harvey Specter from Suits up in my office here. And as I love it, I love the show.
Right.
I do not want to wear a suit every day. I
Right.
don't. I
Right.
don't want to stay until, it's dark outside and stare out the window. I don't do that. And so I do think as you get in the profession, you've really got to look at what kind of life do you want to have, um, and what do you want it to look like. I mean, when I first started, I worked in family law, which is a billable requirement,
Right.
and then ultimately did switch over to PI. And I also would say too that for the person out there that's thinking PI is just this pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Well, there's a lot of stuff that happens though to build that rainbow though, as that person's gone for that year to make that 700,000, the trial work, the litigation, the stress, the long weekends, everything else that goes through. Plus in a lot of areas too, there's a lot of risk involved because the costs that are getting fronted and everything else. So, it's easy to see the shiny rainbow, the pot of gold, but you miss some of the other stuff though, and things right there as well. And so I look at it more as one too, as really having it's a thing I've noticed, Neil, actually in a lot of masterminds I've been in the last few years is I think generally people lack a lot of vision. And when you can have that vision defined, now it doesn't need to be my once and be all vision forever, but even like what do you want in the next 5 years? That can then help propel you and move you towards something. But I think that's probably one of the biggest thing that's lacking. And then so the easy answer then if I don't have vision, let's just work and go make money. You
Well,
know what I mean?
the frustrating thing is that whether you're a young lawyer or you're in the middle or you're where I am,
Yeah.
however you want to define it, please don't define it.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, you're most likely on social media on
Yeah.
some platform, and you're constantly looking to your right or to your left, or you're swiping to your right or to your
Yeah.
left, and you see all of this stuff going on. How much how much money people are making, how many followers they have.
Hmm.
These people must be awfully successful, not realizing that most of them are probably not nearly as successful
Yeah.
as they seem to be. And we're in an environment where it's very hard for young people, to think about, okay, what's realistic. I have to pay my rent, I have to pay my student loans.
Hmm.
My wife and I are having a baby.
Yeah.
What is the measure of success for me at the end of the day? Because I went through this too. For me, the measure of success to some extent was, where did I start out from and where am I now? I'm sure you could do the same thing. And
Yeah.
you say,
Oh yeah.
okay, if I put this in the form of a diagram, I'd see I'd see the lines going all the way up from
Yeah.
where I started out to now. So
Same.
that's a success. I mean,
Yeah.
how much more do you want than that? Yeah, and you have freedom. I watch some of your posts and your pictures, you and Gretchen all hanging out, doing all kinds of fun stuff.
Right.
Isn't that success?
Oh, absolutely. Anytime, and there's a great a book that I like called Way of the Peaceful Warrior, where Dan Millman talks about, you want to, there's a question that he's asked where it's what time is it? And the time is now. And where are you? And you are here. And so it's really about being present and being in the moment. So as much as we have the future outlook, we also can look to the past. But really, the most important thing happening is this right now. And
Yeah,
that's it.
you
And
know,
so, yeah,
you were kind enough to tell us what your age. I think you said about 50,
I'll be 50 in
and
July. Yeah.
and you look great. And
Thanks.
I have to say, looking through your timeline on Instagram,
Mhm.
somewhere along the line, you became a monster physically. You lost a lot of weight, and all I see is muscles. So,
Yeah.
um, and I'll throw this in there. You also mentioned, I don't know where I saw this, maybe it was on YouTube or something, sober by choice. And you explained what that was.
Mhm.
And so I'd love for you to talk about that. And most importantly, to let us know what the inspiration was for you to become a more healthy physically, mentally, and probably even a better lawyer as a result of what you've done.
Yeah, so just for all transparency too, a sober by choice, I ended up stopping that. I went 100 days. And generally these days, so I will go usually 30 to 60 days, 2 or 3 times a year and stop fully. I've done 75 hard and I've completed that. And I did another thing about a year ago called the 12-hour walk, which is from Colin O'Brady, which I'd recommend to anybody. You can do it anywhere. It's a fascinating thing. It's you with you for 12 hours, and that is it. And it's you find out a lot about yourself in those 12 hours. I think it's important for lawyers because you go through some really, really high stress stuff to be able to one, put yourself in check and control what you can control. From a physical standpoint, our health is what we've got. So however people want to do it, it can be walking, it can be, surfing, playing baseball, whatever it may be, do something.
And What,
For
what,
me,
what,
go
what
ahead.
was your inspiration?
So I mean, I've worked out a long time with my brother, and so we've got an app that we use together. His son is now 15, and he's a physical beast, and so I think part of it is also the idea of getting close to 50. I don't want to just fold up, and so yeah, like I was at the gym this morning at 4 in the morning, and so it's just something that I keep moving forward to right now. I mean, obviously, there's you try stuff and you find different coaches or what have
Right,
you, and
right.
the one that's the right fit. But again, I think it's not only, but it's the physical piece of it. It's the idea of controlling your intake of what's coming into your body. And then also too, I do think the other piece though that people really need to work on is what's up here. So I listen to a ton of audiobooks, a ton of podcasts. It is like I like when you talk about how it's like we can obsess about things, right? I obsess about the business. I never stop thinking about it ever. But it's okay because I actually really enjoy it. I love it. And so it's a thing that I think about constantly. I think about it with the team. I think about it with the structure of the business, all of that stuff. And I mean, friends from the mastermind as well who do the same thing, not because it's a burden on us. It's because we actually really enjoy it. And it's
Right.
something that just really, it's inspiring. And you see these stories from other business owners outside of law who are just really out there doing some really, really great stuff. And these days, too, I'll go to conferences that are outside of the legal realm. And I think it's really important to do
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
other business conferences or, motivation
Yeah.
conferences, things like that. I think it's really, really important to do.
Your transparency online, which everybody should just follow you because the reels that you have, the stuff on YouTube, you're as authentic as it gets, and that kind of meshes with it does mesh with this podcast here, that one lawyer. And I'm thrilled that you're able to share your life literally with everybody else because there's so much to learn. And
Yeah.
that brings me to digital and how digital has basically interfered with many people, lawyers included,
Hmm.
from being authentic and
Yeah.
and being relationship first.
Hmm.
So how does your firm marry both digital AI, if you will, also, and authenticity.
Yeah, I think it's important that when you're posting and putting stuff out there to, like we talked about earlier, is, that we're vulnerable and really show who we are, that I show what works well and what doesn't. And I think it's really important both as a business and within your own personal social that you do that. Everything is not polished. Everything's not perfect. I did a post a little while back on what happens if you have to just get up and do a retake and messed up during the
So that
actual post itself. I mean, because we all screw up. But the reality is just get it out there, And I think one of the things, I did a post a while back on what I call the old guy in the locker room. So when we're kids and when we're younger and we go into the locker room and we go into change, and so we go to change, what happens? We grab our towel, we're fully toweled up, nobody can see anything. Well, the old guy, because we care about everything, what this person right next to us is thinking, and everybody's judging us and doing all this. But then the guy next to us, who's the older guy in the locker room, in his 60s or 70s, what
right,
is he? He's totally naked. Why? Because he doesn't care. And
right,
to get to that spot of just not caring. So for myself, in the beginning, not as much, but now for sure, I don't really care, I'll put the stuff
that's
out,
great,
and I've had some posts too where it's negative comments and things, but that's okay. It's real life,
right.
and I'm
I,
not for everybody, and
I,
that's all right, you know
I,
what I
I
mean?
I think that alone, that philosophy that you just talked about, that unloads a tremendous burden on what most people carry around. The freedom,
Yeah.
to permit yourself to just be who you are. I remember when I was finishing my first book, Who's in the Waiting Room, and I looked at it and I said, "Who's going to want to read this book? This is
Right.
just a bullshit book that And I remember calling my daughter right at the time. I think she was 20,
Uh-huh.
and I said to her, her name is Sari, and I said, "Sari, what do you think? Should I do this?"
Yeah.
And she said, and she had read one part of it already, and she said, "Well, did you read it?" I said, "Yes." And she says, "And what do you think?" I said, "Well, I did the best that I could, and I think it's pretty good." And
Yeah.
she said, "Well, then put it out there." And of course I did because I already put so much into it.
Sure.
And I guess I just wanted to hear something back. And within 2 days after it was out there, somebody who my wife was friends with, not really me, sent me a text and said, "We just finished reading your book, and her husband and her were going to go out to dinner that night and talk about their relationships with other people."
Mm.
And the moment I heard that, I said, "Okay, so you know what? If you just put it out there and you just be yourself,
Yeah.
really good things will happen." Often that is what happens.
Yes.
And often nothing bad happens.
Right.
And if something bad happens, it's completely disproportionate to all the good that happens.
So, and it's interesting that you say that too, because have you ever heard the idea that my wife listens to a podcast on thought work?
Huh?
And the lady talks about this idea that we have this idea in our head of the bad thing that's going to happen, right?
Mhm.
And so if I do X, then this thing will happen. She
Right.
goes, well, here's the problem is our subconscious brain, we stop too soon. She's like, I want you to actually make yourself go further. So if I do X, this client's not going to hire us. Now go further. Then I'm going to lose my job. Then I'm going to be homeless. Then my wife's going to divorce me. My kids will never talk to me. I won't be able to see my new grandkid coming up in a while. All of these other bad things, right? I'll be sleeping under a bridge. I won't get to see my dog. All of this stuff. And then you snap, it forces you to snap your brain out and go, well, that's never going to happen ever. Right? There's no way
Right.
I would let that happen.
Right. Right. Right.
Then it makes you realize that even where you stopped isn't going to happen because you're not going to let it happen. And then
Right.
she says, now you have to do one other thing. Now make yourself flip it. And now ask yourself and say, well, what if it actually works? So, what if who's in the waiting room is actually a success? Now what happens? And now go this way. And so it's an interesting thought exercise on making yourself push it further into just crazy land. And then also now then go to the good side because we're so quick to judge and we believe up here what we're thinking is true. We're so wrong. 99% of the time we are incorrect on it. And it just doesn't happen that way. It
I,
doesn't.
I don't remember when I did it, but I think I did a reel in the last couple of months where we talked about
Mhm.
the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And I remember saying something like, when you walk into a room, of people that you don't know, that's when the imposter syndrome kind of happened to me a few times. And, you just have to remind yourself as best as you can that you see everybody that's in that room. Most of them are thinking the same way that you are. That's really what it is. It's a mindset that you have to change. And remember that, much of what you have to say is going to affect at least some people in a positive way. So I agree with everything that you're saying. And I think it's important and that's why I asked you about the question about authenticity and digital.
Mhm.
So if I
Yeah.
can go back to just circle back to that for one last minute, and that is how do you merge the two? How do you merge digital out there with being the authentic person that you are and maintaining true relationships?
Yeah, so the way I do it in digital is one, I mean, obviously with our personal posts, we post a lot of stuff that we do, who we are, our successes, our
Right,
failures, stuff that I listen to. I'll post quotes and things like that. But and even from a reel standpoint, I'm actually a one take reel person. I
right,
do not do multiple takes. And the part of the reason for that though is to be authentic with it. I
right,
don't want this fully clean, polished thing.
right,
I just want to get in, get my message out, and get out.
right,
And a lot of what I get from that is stuff that inspires me or stuff that I've listened to at the gym in the morning or what have you. And I think that those are the things that even for me, if it helps one person, I'm like, great. And even if it doesn't, it's for me.
right,
Because now I've got this great record of stuff out there that I can remember because obviously as I get older, my memory's not what it used to be. So it's like, cool. I've got this backlog. So I think it's important. I've talked to a lot of people that they're waiting for the perfect setup on digital, right? I need to get the right camera. I need to get the right lights. I need to get all of this stuff. Well, that's an excuse for delay. And I think it's one of those things where, force yourself or get an accountability partner to say, by the end of today, you will have one reel posted. That's it. 1 minute or less. Get it done, get it posted, get it out there. And
right,
then the
right.
more you do that, the more you can kind of move forward and just really be comfortable in the camera doing that stuff. Because I'll tell you, like there's a great talk, a TED talk by Shankar Vedantam, who hosts Hidden Brain, about the person we are today is not who we're going to be down the road. So the me today that's doing this stuff, or that's, the attorney running the firm, not the same person that you met 5 years ago, just very, very different in that sense. Because talk about imposter syndrome, like walking into that mastermind,
Right,
that was me, 100%.
right. Yeah,
But today, very, very different.
absolutely.
Yeah,
So the time is winding down, and I have three
perfect.
quick questions that I
Okay.
want to ask you. What's the one thing that you would tell a lawyer right now if they were listening, especially a young lawyer? What is one thing that they could do to stand out as that one lawyer?
To stand out, I would start a channel and I would post about your journey. If
Okay.
you were doing anything, that's what I would do.
And second is, if you could go back and talk to your younger self, I'm sure you this is a loaded question. What would you say, knowing everything that you know today?
I would say you have no idea what's going to come up.
Mm,
Like, so where you're going to go.
good, good. Last one. This is a little bit tougher one. Is
Okay.
there someone that you've lost personally or professionally who you'd want one more conversation with? Who are they, and what would you say to them?
My dad passed away a couple years ago, and so being my dad, we weren't. I mean, it was an okay relationship, but I think just to say goodbye. Um,
That's great. That's beautiful. I knew to ask you those questions because I knew you would share and
yeah,
you'd be authentic. Thanks for being here, and tell everybody who's listening and watching this how they can get in touch with you, how they can connect with you if they either need a lawyer, want to
yeah.
refer something to you, or if they just want to work with you.
Yeah, yeah. So if you want to talk, if you need a lawyer, if you're looking for somebody to talk about business stuff or what have you, you can so I'm at springslawgroup.com. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Christopher Nicolaysen, or TikTok is CN the Law. I'm also on Fortnite most nights and at the same handle at CN the Law. Yeah, and you can have my cell if you want to text me. And literally, like, if you want to chat about business stuff, I'm happy to do it at 719-291-6346.
Love it. Thanks for being here, man.
Awesome.
See you soon in
Thank you.
person. If something here hits home for you, don't keep it to yourself. Tap subscribe. drop a comment, and share this with a lawyer who needs to really hear it. This is That One Lawyer Podcast. See you next time.